Oils or acrylics? That's probably the biggest question that new artists have. Well, stay tuned with me and we'll talk about it. Hi, I'm Linda Paul-Sontag, an Arizona artist, and today we're going to be talking about oils versus acrylics. Certainly one of the biggest questions that new artists are faced is, one, what is the difference? And two, what's going to best suit my needs? Now, fundamentally, the difference between oils and acrylics are oils are pigments that are based in an oil, typically a linseed oil, that requires then that you use certain solvents to deal with those oil-based materials, whereas acrylics are the same pigments, but they're bound in an acrylic polymer solution instead of an oil. This means that they're water soluble, and for a lot of people, to be able to paint and clean up using water is more desirable. But there are certainly benefits to one and the other, and there are also drawbacks. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Certainly, oils have the respect of centuries, and still, oil paints and oil paintings are considered more desirable and bring more money than those who are that are done in acrylics. It's just a matter of perception more than anything else, but certainly oils have a longevity preference to them as opposed to acrylics. Acrylics dry very quickly. It becomes a talent in order to develop the ability to use them, blend with them, and stay ahead of that drying process. When you have acrylics on your palette, and we'll talk about palettes in a later video, but you want to make sure those acrylics are kept moist, or you're going to find that they're drying quickly and they become very difficult to work with when they hit that drying stage. Acrylics also come in various types. So I have some examples here. These are Liquitex products. Liquitex is a very tried and true acrylic brand, but there are several out there. Here you see what is called open acrylic. This is a heavier bodied, slower drying acrylic, but I find they get a little sticky, a little gummy, so it's not my choice, but some people really love them, so experiment. This is a high viscosity acrylic. It means that when it's a higher viscosity, it tends to flow better. You can also get acrylic colors in liquid form as well. Your basic heavy body acrylic. This is useful when you want to lay paint on the canvas thick. You want to see your brush strokes. Whereas the standard acrylic is, pretty typical. You can thin it with water. You can make it transparent if you want. So it's very versatile. Oil paints also come in tubes typically, and there's a lot of variety in those as well, and a lot of brands. You kind of get used to what you prefer when you experiment and use them over time. I find the Gamblin product is a reasonably priced oil paint, and they have other products that to accompany that, such as Gam Salt for a solvent for cleaning brushes, as well as Gam Var, for adding a varnish coat when your painting is completely dry. But of course, there's famous products such as Winsor Newton or Rembrandt for higher quality paints. Many people end up working with both. I have worked with both, but over time, I found that the acrylic does not give me the completely natural appearance that I want in my painting that oil provides because of its versatility. One thing with acrylic paints is it gives your painting a slightly artificial look. Here are a couple examples. Here's a landscape that I did, and you can see that the color truly doesn't look natural. Here's another one. I do a lot of roadside memorabilia. And then I have the same subject matter in oil. And this has a far more natural appearance. Now, both acrylic and oils have mediums to add. And mediums are additives to the painting to achieve certain desired results. Do you want the paint to dry slower? Do you want it to dry faster? We do know that acrylics do dry fast, so you would want to use something probably to retard that drying time. Oils, on the other hand, they dry more slowly, and certain colors are really slow, and others maybe will dry overnight. But you probably will want to speed up the drying process in some cases. And so there are particular mediums that can be added in order to do that. I like to use what is called Liquid Original, and it helps the paint flow off the brush, but also speeds the drying time. I find that particularly light colors are very slow to dry as opposed to the darker colors that seem to dry very quickly. Sometimes actually they'll dry on your palette in a couple of days. With oil also, you can put that paint on your palette and it will stay workable for some time. You want to seal the palette to slow the paint from drying, and there's various types of methods to do that we'll talk about when we talk about which palette you want to use for your painting, whether it's oil or acrylic. I'll also talk about the difference between watercolors and gouache, which is also pronounced wash. It's spelled Guaugch or something like that. And it's not commonly thought of for use for amateurs or beginners. One of the most common reasons people like one or the other is for cleanup. People think that if you clean up using water, that's easier. In a lot of respect, it is. But you are also putting pigments down your sink when you're washing out brushes, when you're using acrylic paints. When you use oil paints, you're typically going to be cleaning that brush in a solvent or even another oil. That's a possibility as well. And very often that pigment then that remains after you let the pigment settle to the bottom of your solvent are easily disposed of on a rag, or even in some cases, people save that pigment and they reuse it. It can be reused as a neutral gray, for instance. I don't know why it is, but when I use acrylics, for some reason, I make a mess. So I find that using oils is easier for me to contain and not get it all over the place and clean up easier. So that's a little counterintuitive to what most people think about using oils versus acrylics. With both oils and acrylics, they can remain workable if they're kept in an airtight container. And acrylics, of course, have got to be kept moist. There are pellets that have little sponges inside them that you wet, and that will help that acrylic paint remain workable. Oils, they typically last some time on your palette, but you can certainly extend the time that they're workable by putting them in an airtight container with something like clove oil, just little drops of that on a piece of cotton. And other people stick it in the freezer, so that works well too. Keeping them properly, you can use oil paint over the course of days or even weeks. Then other mediums are designed to either thicken or thin that paint. If you want an impasto appearance, that's where you see thick paint, heavy brush strokes. Sometimes a palette knife is used to apply that paint. There are particular mediums you can add to help thicken that paint. To summarize, acrylics are fast drying, easy to pump paintings out, easy to finish them in a single session, and have a lot of capability, as opposed to oils, which has slow drying time, but more respect and more ability to have a natural appearance, and will ultimately, if you're looking at selling paintings, command a higher price. Feel free to add your questions to below, and I hope you like and subscribe. And stay tuned for more quick tips for new artists. Thank you for watching.